So welcome back, everyone. The information that I shared with you in our last presentation is totally different to what I was taught as a nurse. I was taught as a nurse that germs are the enemy and we have to kill them. And I would also like to believe that that's the foundation for the fear that people have with COVID at the moment. What is COVID? It is a virus. But as you can see, we don't need to fear viruses. And did you know that these are the current figures? 99% of people that get COVID recover. So you know what I say? Well, how come we have to vaccinate against something that 99% of people recover from? It just defies reason. And that means you've only got 1, maybe 1.5% of people who have it serious, and the figures are showing, and I'm just looking at government figures, that the people that pass with COVID, and of course, when someone dies, it's always tragic, no matter how or why it happened. But the people that do pass are people with pre-existing health conditions. And as my husband said, no one dies of the flu anymore. No one dies of lung cancer anymore. It's given this label. But as you can see by what I showed you, we don't need to fear it. And God said in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. A sound mind considers these things. And as we go through this week, you will see there's lots of things that we can do if we get a cold or a flu that people have been doing for centuries. But in this presentation, I'd like to specifically look at cancer. Now, as we looked at in the first part of last presentation, the Proverbs 26 verse 2 states that the curse causeless shall not come. There is always a reason. Nothing just happens for no reason. That's the basic law of science. So if ever you have a sickness and ever you go to a health professional and you say, why do I have this? And they say, well, it's just something that happens. That's very unscientific. It would be far better that he said, well, we're not sure why, rather than saying, or it's just you. But when Antoine Beauchamp says diseases are born in us and of us, does that mean that everyone that gets sick, it's their own fault? No. No, it is not their own fault, because many are sick through ignorance. Many people don't realise what the true cause of disease is. I have a girlfriend and her father was a pharmacist. And every new drug that came in, he would give to his daughter, thinking he was giving her the best. And in her 30s, she had kidney disease because the drugs that her father had given him. Now, who's at fault there? Well, you'd have to say the pharmaceutical companies, wouldn't you? I don't think doctors lie, and there are some excellent doctors, and there are some excellent plumbers, and some excellent builders, and some not so good plumbers and not so good builders. Is this right? And it's the same in every trade. But I do know that the pharmaceutical companies lie, I'm sorry to tell you. I was reading in the Time magazine, new cancer cure, 50% cure. And then when you look down to the fine print, 2 people were tested and 1 died. 50% cure. So sometimes the figures are just, I don't know, wiggled a little bit, so to speak, and not quite true. So we have lots of books in our health centre because I am an avid reader. I think I'm on my 7th book that I've read in the 7 months I've been away from Australia. And we have many books on doctors, naturopaths, nutritionists, scientists who've been able to successfully conquer cancer. So I'm always intrigued, how do they do it? What have they done? And in each case, there's some little variations here, there's little variations there. You might have heard of IV vitamin C, some are doing. Apricot kernel seeds, another one many talk about. Fever bars, there's many bits and pieces. But I looked for the common denominators. And I have found that with all of these books, all of these authors, there's 3 common denominators. Cancer loves sugar. In fact, it consumes glucose at 15 times the rate of any other cell. Let me show you how and why. Here is the CBD, the central business district of the human body. The glucose goes in and it goes through a 20-step pathway. And that 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. The end result of this 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose we'll just call P. This chemical form of glucose gets fed into what's often called the powerhouse of the cell. This 8-step pathway is called the powerhouse of the cell because of its ability to give us 36 units of energy. So the question arises, how come a 20-step pathway only gives 2 units, and how come an 8-step pathway gives 36? It's oxygen. Oxygen makes the difference. This pathway is a very fast pathway, this 20-step pathway, and this pathway, it produces energy by the process of fermentation, so no oxygen. This pathway up here is the pathway that cancer uses. No wonder it loves sugar, because that pathway is going to consume 15 times the fuel. Cancer hates no glucose because it runs so fast it can't survive without large amounts. Whereas this pathway down here is a slower pathway. And it can patiently wait for the glucose to come from the vegetables and the legumes. Cancer hates oxygen. In fact, cancer cannot live in the presence of oxygen. So cancer loves when there's very little oxygen around. Cancer also loves a very acid environment. It hates an alkaline environment. These are the 3 common denominators that I have found. And I do mention this in my book. Dr. Otto Warburg, he got a Nobel Prize in 1946 for showing this. For showing that cancer cells run up there, are consuming 15 times the glucose and don't want oxygen. So a lady contacted me recently, said, Barbara, you'll be interested at the recent research where they're discovering that cancer cells consume 15 times the glucose and hate oxygen. And I said, I'm so glad they're studying that, but did you know that Professor Otto Warburg in 1946 got a Nobel Prize for discovering that? And by the way, this is why chemotherapy kills cancer cells. Because the cancer cell is going to consume 15 times the chemotherapy that another cell will consume. The problem with chemotherapy is the good cells are killed off too. And as one medical rep was in a presentation, well, he was a smaller rep being schooled by the pharmaceutical companies because they were about to take the drugs to the doctors. And he said that the presentator said, with this chemotherapy, it's like Russian roulette. We just hope that more cancer cells are killed than good cells. And this rep was shocked. He looked at the other reps And then just smiling and nodding, he walked out of there. And that was the turning point for him. He said, I'm not going to do this anymore. This is unethical. But that's the truth on the matter. In fact, the current modes of treatment for cancer today, as Dr. Tullio Simoncini says in his book, Cancer is a Fungus, he says it's poison, burn or cut, which is chemotherapy or radiotherapy or surgery. And I do acknowledge that in some cases where there's an advanced tumour and surgery is possible, it can certainly help to turn the tide. Absolutely. I never say never. Every single case is different. No two cases are the same. Sometimes, though, it can be so advanced surgery is not possible. Am I advising surgery? I'm not advising anything. I'm just giving you the information. The choice is yours. And so I want to tell you about Elizabeth Cott. Elizabeth Cott was a lady, and this happened 5 years ago. She's in her early 60s at the time, and she was having a lot of abdominal pain. She went to the doctor, and they did a few tests, they did scans, they did a biopsy. They say, you have 3 tumours, malignant tumours in your abdomen. The doctor said, you've got to move quickly. He said, I want you to have chemotherapy, some radiotherapy, it'll shrink the tumours and then we may be able to do surgery. Now she did what every single person should do. She said, thank you so much for your advice, I'm going to seriously consider it. And she left. And she began to investigate her options. And a friend of hers gave her a DVD of mine. In fact, it's the DVD that's out there. There's 2 sets of DVDs out there. One is my full set, which is, I think, 13 hours, 6 DVDs. And the other has some specifics, cancer and its cures. She watched it. She was convicted that this is what she wanted to do. She was a Christian lady. She was a Seventh-day Adventist lady. And so she booked into Misty Mountain Health Retreat for 2 weeks. And what we did with Elizabeth Cott is this. Number 1, starve. Dr. Holland, he wrote a book with Doug Kaufman called The Germ That Causes Cancer. He says if you deprive cancer cells of glucose, they self-destruct. And you can see why. They're consuming large amounts. So how do you starve it? Dr. Tullio Simoncini, in his book Cancer is a Fungus, he found in every single case of cancer, he found the yeast candida, sometimes in large amounts, sometimes in small amounts. A person can have a yeast presence in their body and not have cancer, but it certainly can develop into that if it gets the right food. The body's designed to heal itself. It will when it's given the right conditions. So with starving the fungus, we stopped all fruit. One lady said, but Barbara, God made fruit good. I said, he did. He made fruit very good. But in this situation, we want to create an environment where cancer cannot survive. And if that means stopping fruit for 6 weeks, then we stop it. So what did they eat? Well, there's so many vegetables. And you've even got some savoury fruits. What's that? Your tomato, cucumber, avocado, lemon. So these foods, absolutely. It's the sugars you want to get down. Even the carbohydrates, get that right down. Maybe a little brown rice, maybe a little millet sometimes. Lots of legumes. Legumes are medium to low in the carbohydrates. Legumes are great in their proteins. In my book, Self-Heal by Design, I specify programs there. So I'm touching on them now, but you can explore them more when you see the book. You've also got to check your house. We had one very sad story of a lady who was only 35. She had 3 little children, and she came to our retreat. And she was walking very slowly. She had very advanced breast cancer. And when she heard the link between cancer and fungus, she went, oh no. We said, what is it? She said, this is my house. And this is the sunny side. Because in Australia, our north is our sun, but your sun is south, isn't it? So I'm just going to say sunny side. She said, all the bedrooms are on the back of the house. And she said, our bedroom, this is her bedroom there, and it has a bathroom. And she said, it's always going mouldy. The bedrooms are always mouldy. And there's huge big trees. Huge big trees. So even in the summer you might get a bit of sun there and there. Even then, no sun's coming in at all. She said all the bedrooms tend to mould. And as the lady of the house, she was the cleaner. And she never wore a mask. There is a time for a mask. And because when you clean it and you disrupt it, you're breathing in the mould waste. The skin's getting the mould waste. It's a very sad story. She rang up her husband. She said, I cannot come home. And when he heard the story, he said, absolutely. They didn't know. How many are sick through ignorance? It's a very sad story. It was a very advanced case. I always say to people, we see 3 outcomes. We see turnarounds, we see 3 months go to 6 years, and we see the last days made more comfortable. And that's what it was with this lady. Very sad story. But you know, no matter what stage a person's at, isn't it a plus? Each one is a plus. We've had some come at late stages, and they have passed a few months later, and their wife or their husband have rang us and they've said, thank you so much. What we did at the retreat and the things we implemented made the last days much more comfortable. We had one lady come. She wasn't given a long time to live. She was only 40. She said, I am on chemotherapy for palliative care. I said, do you know what palliative care is? It's making the last days made more comfortable. I said, this chemotherapy has made all your hair fall out. I said, you've got nausea 24/7. You've got diarrhea. I said, I have no control over your medication, but if I was you, I'd stop. She hadn't thought about it like that. She thought when they said palliative care, it would just make it a bit easier until she passes. So she very gladly stopped. So when it says starve, it's not only what you're eating. So the person has lots of vegetables, they have daily legumes. One lady said, I have lima beans on Monday, lentils on Tuesday, Wednesday's tofu day, organic tofu of course. Thursday is black-eyed pea. You call them peas, we call them beans. So can you see, variety is important. And seeds and nuts. Now here is a good guideline for how many nuts per meal. What can fit into your hand? I think I can squeeze about 8 in there. My 6'6" brother-in-law can fit a few more in. One man said, fingertips touch the palm of the hand. I think I get it. Is it like that? No. One family said, our 3-year-old has 3 and our 4-year-old has 4. I said, what does your 80-year-old have? And so the nuts and the seeds and the legumes, as we'll look at further as we go through this series, they're high in fibre, excellent proteins and great fats, the 3 essentials. Number 2, kill. I do think we've got to get away from the kill mentality, but there are herbs that will kill fungus and won't kill you. Isn't that good news? Psalm 104 verse 14, I think it is. God says that he gave herbs for the service of man. Garlic is a potent fungal killer. Also olive leaf extract. It's got a plant chemical in there that directly kills fungus. Also grapefruit seed extract. Have you ever eaten a grapefruit and bite into a seed? You'll think the grapefruit's sweet. when you taste that seed. Also, there are some excellent essential oils. So essential oils, oregano. Now, because it's an essential oil, you have to go very lightly, just a few drops. You start with a few drops 3 times a day. Another strong fungal one is thyme, and a very well-known one is your clove. Now, you don't take all those at once. You don't use all your ammunition at once. Now, as I showed you in the cycle of life, one of the reasons why so many doctors today are being told stop using so many antibiotics. In fact, there's a little notice in every doctor's surgery. The World Health Organization biggest health care scare today is the overuse of antibiotics. Have you heard that? Because as I showed you in the cycle of life, these microbes adapt and adjust. So if they're continually being fed drugs, a lot of them die, but some of them adapt and adjust. And you know what these antibiotics are creating? Superbugs that nothing will touch. So that's the other scare. And the microbes can adapt and adjust to these. So my suggestion is, for someone who's conquering cancer, they do garlic for 2 weeks. They do olive leaf extract for 2 weeks. They do grapefruit seed. So you alternate it. So you've got quite a few there to alternate. And in my book, it talks about it. I've also another herb called portiaco. Portiaco is a South American herb that has strong antifungal properties. So you adapt and adjust. Just as the body's adapting to it, change. And do another one. Number 3, balance. Bring back the balance into the gastrointestinal tract with probiotics. Here's your Lactobacillus acidophilus bifidus bacterium. They're the 2 permanent, friendly or healthy bacteria in the gut. So a person can implement foods that are high in this, like your sauerkraut. Now, a lot of people get confused with fermented foods and cultured foods. Cultured foods are excellent foods, and they've been used for centuries in just about every culture. So your sauerkraut in Europe, and your miso in Japan, and your sourdough breads. If the sourdough bread is let sit too long, it'll go sour, heavy, and it'll produce alcohol. You don't want that. If the sauerkraut is let go too long, it can produce alcohol. That's when it gets to fermentation. So can you see the difference there? But you can also buy powders, probiotic powders. They're best taken 3/4 of an hour before breakfast, so they go way down into your lower part of your gut. Number 4, alkalize. How do you alkalize the body? You take mostly alkaline foods. All your vegetables are alkaline. There is a question mark, and that is with the nightshade group of vegetables. That's your tomato, you call them bell pepper, and eggplant, and white potato. For some people, they sit well. For some people, they don't. Especially people with arthritis or gout, they should leave off those nightshade vegetables. Also, what you're looking for when you're alkalizing is 80% alkaline foods and 20% acid foods. So what that does is that maintains a balance. Your blood pH never changes, but the tissue pH does. That's what we're looking at more alkalizing. So the only part of our body that should be acid is our stomach, because it needs to be acid to break our protein down. Body's waste is acid as well. But when you bring this balance here, it creates a more alkaline environment in the tissues. And you can test tissue alkalinity or acid alkalinity by litmus paper in the saliva and the urine. So what are your alkaline, all your alkaline foods, your vegetables? And also some lima bean, lentil and soy. They're your alkaline legumes. And your alkaline grains are millet, quinoa, and also your ancient grains like spelt and kamut. The two alkaline nuts are almond. In my book, Self-Heal by Design, I have a whole chapter on the acid alkaline, and it's very clear there, and Brazil. So all your other nuts, you might have a little bit of that to make up the 20%. The other legumes, you might have a little bit of that to make up the 20%. So it's not hard to do. So how we alkalize at Misty Mountain, we have a hyperbaric chamber. And a hyperbaric chamber, puts oxygen into the body under pressure, because Henry's law states that more gas goes into liquid under pressure. So the gas is oxygen, and the liquid, of course, is the body tissues, your blood. And I know Eden Valley Health Retreat in Denver, Colorado, I know they have hyperbaric chambers, so some people can check that out. Also, we do green drinks. Now, we gather wild greens, blend them with water. We usually gather about 4 different greens, all edible greens: stinging nettle, dock, comfrey, plantain, pumpkin tips. So we usually do 4 different ones a day, and we do 4 cups of wild greens, and we blend it with 4 cups of water, then we strain it. So it's like you're drinking grass. It just tastes like grass. But it's just water. But it's green, so you blend it until it's green. We usually either put mint or lemongrass or lemon balm, just so it tastes a little bit better, because it just tastes like grass. But that alkalizes from the inside. The most alkaline substance is sodium bicarbonate. But if you drink that, all it will do is it just alkalizes what it touches. It won't alkalize the tissues like the green drink will. And Dr. Tullio Simoncini, he was injecting sodium bicarb right straight into the cancer. He'd put a portacath in and inject it in. And he was getting 90% success rate. But you know, the pharmaceutical companies can't patent sodium bicarbonate, can they? The last I heard that he'd been put in jail on a charge of manslaughter. Maybe someone came to him in latter stages and they died. My husband said, if only he'd injected them with chemotherapy. He wouldn't be in jail, would he? And so sometimes I've come under criticism for quoting a disgraced oncologist named Dr. Tullio Simoncini. But I, as one who've been banned from Australia, and I'm totally innocent of all the charges they have against me, understand that maybe Dr. Tullio Simoncini has gone through the same thing. So what we do at Misty Mountain, because we don't have the ability to inject sodium bicarb straight in, we do a process that was given to me by a Canadian doctor, and we get 2 kilos of sodium bicarbonate, and we put it with 5 litres of very hot water and about 1/3 of a cup of lemon juice. And we dip a towel in, we wring it out, and we wrap it round a leg, and then we wrap the leg in a blanket or a plastic bag, keep it warm. Then the other end, torso, then the other arm, and then the whole body's wrapped in blankets. And we leave them there for about an hour. and the skin slowly absorbs this sodium bicarb, which, remember, it's a powerful alkalizer. In fact, they use sodium bicarbonate in agriculture to kill fungus on plants. So this is what we did with Elizabeth Cott. So while she was with us for 2 weeks, that's the diet she was on. We had her on herbs. We brought back the balance. She had a hyperbaric chamber every day for 5 days, I think, and the sodium bicarbonate for 5 days. And then she went home. And she went home with the programs that are outlined in my book. So after 6 weeks, she started to have grapefruit. After 6 weeks, she was also able to start a little bit of sourdough spelt bread. After another 2 months, she started to implement some low glycemic index fruits like berries. And so your cherries, blueberries, she started to implement a little bit more of that. But after 3 months, she went back to the doctor. He did blood tests, he assessed her, he was frowning. He said, look, just keep doing what you're doing. Now, what did he say on the first visit? You got to start chemo immediately. She said, is that it? He said, yeah. He said, come and see me in 6 months. She came back after 6 months, and he was most puzzled this time. One of her tumours had totally gone. After another year, another tumour has totally gone. Elizabeth Cott is so excited at the results. In fact, some of my accusers accused me of making up Elizabeth Cott's story. She said, give them my phone number. Let me talk to them. You can go to her house, you can visit her. She rang me just before I left Australia, and she is looking so good. She said, I feel better now. I think she's early 70s now. She said, I feel better now than I felt in my 40s. She's now giving meetings and cooking classes. She said to me, I think I know what caused my cancer. This lady's a vegetarian, she's a Christian. Why? She said, I was the dessert maker at church. And in Australia, we've got a dessert named pavlova. It's meringue. And they make a meringue by beating egg white and sugar and then bake it slowly, I think, and put cream and fruit or something on top. She said, I would make pavlovas this big and I would beat in 16 cups of white sugar. Think of that next time someone offers you a slice. She said, I believe that my sugar, she said I was eating a lot of bread, a lot of sugars. She said, I believe that was just feeding my cancer. Sometimes you don't know all the causes that have come together to cause it. But when you realise that these microorganisms are opportunist organisms, it makes a lot of sense to make sure our body's organs of elimination are eliminating well. And so what are the organs of elimination? Let's make a list of these organs of elimination. Being organs of elimination, they're eliminating waste. And I believe this is one of the things that Antoine Bourchon was referring to when he said disease is born in us and of us. Now, Florence Nightingale, she certainly worked hard to clean up the hospital. We've got to make sure we keep our bodies clean and running well. So the first organ of elimination is your skin. At Misty Mountain Health Retreat, we have a steam sauna down by the creek, and every night the guests go in the steam sauna, get very, very hot. We actually create a fever. Do you know a fever's a wonderful thing? And then they dive into the creek, and then they go back into the steam sauna, and they usually do that 3 times. But what's happening is they're perspiring big time. So when you give the body the best conditions for this, up to 70% of waste can be eliminated via the skin. That's why the steam sauna is such an important part of the detox program. So what does your skin need? Your skin needs to breathe. Make sure you only have natural fibres next to your skin. Your skin needs you to be drinking adequate water because it uses water to throw off the waste. So how much water should we be drinking a day? At least 8 glasses. That's 8-ounce glasses. And make it come in little by little. How does God send the rain? Little by little by little. And when a torrent does come, have you noticed the topsoil gets washed away, gutters get clogged? So please don't give your body torrents of water. Drink it little by drink it. This is what I do in the morning. I get up I drink half a glass of water. I go to the bathroom, I drink another half a glass of water. I get dressed, I have another half glass of water. I pray, I have another half glass of water. See what you're doing? You spread it out all over the day. My husband is a mighty conqueror. And one day I said, if you drank your water, water, gong, 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 conquered water. I said, no. He said, no. I said, half a glass. Come back and have the rest a bit later. Your body can handle that a lot better. It can utilise it more. We also we want water in and we want water out. So we should be washing our bodies every day. And as you'll see when we look at our immune system, I think Thursday in the day we're looking at the immune system. The best immune system booster is finishing every hot shower with cold. This is a good time to get used to it before you go into the very cold of winter. Also, the skin needs you to exercise because when you exercise, you increase the circulation of the blood to the skin. And when you increase the circulation of the blood to the skin, you increase your skin's ability to throw off waste. Number 2, organ of elimination is kidneys. Your kidneys basically need to be warm. So it's very important to keep those kidneys covered with natural fibre so they're warm. Your kidneys also need you to exercise. When you exercise, you increase the circulation of the blood to the kidneys. And as you're walking or rebounding or whatever you're doing, your kidneys are moving. And your kidneys need adequate water. The more water you drink, the thinner your blood is and the easier it is for your kidneys to filter your blood. But remember, the kidneys love it when you take it little by little. Lungs need fresh air. It's important to be warm at night, but it's also important to breathe fresh air. Lungs need fresh air. Lungs also need you to be drinking adequate water, because there's a tiny little droplet of water in every alveoli. And because of the surface tension of water, every time you breathe out, that alveoli collapses, allowing you to take in more air. Exercise. When you exercise, you breathe deeply. Right now, you're breathing in 500 mil of air. And when you get to the top of the hill, running up the hill, and you're breathing like this, you're breathing in 3,600 mil of air and you're breathing out 3,600 mil of waste. So exercise is important for your lungs. And number 4 is the colon. Dr. Kellogg said 3 intakes of food a day should equal 3 evacuations a day. And notice that the colon won't do what you tell it. If you're overgoing and you tell it to stop, it won't. And if you're not going and you tell it to go, it won't. No, the colon needs a little bit of help. It needs gentle stimulation, not irritation. So how do we get the colon to work as it should? Laughter. The merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Relax. Tight mind, tight colon, said one colon writer. Relax. The colon also needs you to be drinking adequate water. In dehydration, more water gets taken out of the colon, should be taken out, and then you're left with rabbit pellets and cement. The colon also needs you to exercise. When you exercise, you increase the circulation of the blood to the colon, and the colon also moves every step you're taking. As Tristan and I were doing our push-ups this morning, have you done your push-ups today? Even that is working, that is giving a nice gentle massage to the colon. The colon also needs fibre. Fibre sweeps the colon. Fibre not only sweeps the colon, but it stimulates peristalsis through the colon. So we should be having a whole food, plant-based diet. But also, the colon needs the proper position. I think it's Friday night, we're going to go on a journey through the gastrointestinal tract. We're going to start at the mouth and end up at the other end. It's a fascinating journey. So I'm going to give you a little preview of what I'll talk about a little bit more, much more, on Friday night. When we're sitting on the throne, here's the throne. This is what the colon looks like. Here's colon. There's appendix, there's small intestine, here's colon. And the last bit is like that, maybe not that narrow. So there's a little muscle that holds up the last part of the colon. And we're very glad for that hold up because it prevents accidents. And when you sit on the throne, that muscle is still a little taut. Things can come through, but if you have a little stool in front of the throne, so that when you sit for your daily evacuation and your knees are up in the air, so you're in the squatting position, then puborectalis relaxes. And when puborectalis relaxes, the colon opens right up, and so the daily evacuation can pass with much greater ease. It also takes pressure off the anus, which prevents and can help heal hemorrhoids. I've been in many countries, Singapore and in India and Africa and Asian countries, and often in the floor of the bathroom, it's all tiled, there's just a hole, and that's the toilet. So traditionally, many people have always squatted to do their daily evacuation, and science now shows it is the best way because it relaxes that muscle, puborectalis. And many people have found help with colon problems by implementing that little stool. You can go to Bed Bath and Beyond and buy a squatty potty, and it just wraps around. And so when you stimulate and ensure that your 4 organs of elimination are eliminating effectively, basically you're preventing build-up of waste happening in the body. And there's one more tiny little organ called the tongue. And there's a very simple way to help pull waste out of the tongue. It's oil pulling using coconut oil. So putting a spoonful of coconut oil in your mouth, swishing, swish around and around. It's fantastic for gums. I've also known people to cure gingivitis, bleeding gums, infected gums by oil pulling a couple of times a day. You usually swish around for about 10 minutes and then release it out on the grass, not down the plug hole. Because if you do, that coconut oil will go hard and your plumbing will all plug up. So please release it out on the grass, take some water, rinse it a few times and release that out. And that's an excellent little detox that you can do. So as I showed you in my first presentation, these microbes are just opportunist organisms. And so you can do a lot to prevent sickness in the body by making sure all your organs of elimination are eliminating effectively and efficiently. We've got time for some questions. So we've left 15 minutes for questions. We've got a roving mic. So if there are any questions, we can look at those now.
A simple but complex for me question. What kind of water?
What type of water?
Yes, I've been searching for the answer to that for many years.
Okay, well, rainwater's good, but of course you have to have a nice clean roof. And there's people that are saying that the alkaline water is best, and it costs quite a few $1,000s to get an alkaline water machine, and it is good water, but I don't think it's worth that much money, especially when you consider that a squeeze of lemon juice in the water can bring it more alkaline. But if you are you on Mains Town, you're best to have a water filter, and the best water filter is a water filter that will take out not only the chlorine but also the fluoride. The fluoride is very harsh on your kidneys and also on your liver. But if you've got chlorine in the water and you run the water and leave it on the bench, within an hour the chlorine has evaporated. It's very easy to filter chlorine out, but it's not that easy to filter the fluoride out.
I had the privilege to meet my great-grandmother, and I was told that she had her teeth healthy in her late 90s, and what I saw her doing was rub her teeth with salt. Can you give any explanation how would that benefit? I know you're not a dentist, but somehow you learned about it.
Well, traditionally a lot of people have cleaned their teeth with sodium bicarbonate, and you see how chalky toothpaste is. It's mostly sodium bicarbonate. One of the biggest enemies or the biggest causes of tooth decay is bits of food in between the teeth. If you ever flossed your teeth and you smell the floss, what happens is if food's left between the teeth, it actually starts to break down, as any food does in this warm, moist environment, and then the bacteria that comes along to feed on that, as you saw in the cycle of life, the waste from that bacteria is the acid that breaks down the teeth. So I would think that your grandmother scrubbing her teeth with salt basically was cleaning out between the teeth and preventing that growth. Yeah, baking soda, sodium bicarbonate's the same thing.
So since skin is a major organ for getting rid of your waste, I would think, and chemicals are really bad for us, I would think then body lotion is probably not good. And same with perfume. Can you comment on that? Is there anything that's okay?
Yes, what you say is right.
How bad is it?
Well, it's as bad as the chemicals that are in it. And we've got a little book in Australia called Chemical Maze. And I know today you can just Google different names and you can find out exactly what they are. But what you're saying is right. And I know ladies like nice scents, and their husbands also like it too. But there are some beautiful essential oils that you can use rather than the perfumes, which are usually chemicals. And the body lotions are often chemicals. Coconut oil is a good one, and I do know that you can get some biodegradable ones that don't have the chemicals in them, that are made on maybe coconut oils, almond oil, castor oils, and have some essential oils in them which are nice and scented. But if a person is eating adequate oils in their diet, their skin is usually, it's enough. So I don't put anything on my skin, but I eat olive oil and nuts and seeds every day. I don't drink half a cup of olive oil, I have a little olive oil. It's a very concentrated food. You don't need much, but you do need some.
Barbara, a question that I have for you is, Are you going to be demonstrating the bicarbonate wrap?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not going to be demonstrating the bicarbonate wrap. It's a very intense treatment, but I did demonstrate it when I was in Invercargill a few years ago. An Indian doctor asked me to. He was the one that got me to do the meetings. And unbeknownst to me, that was put up on YouTube. Because about a year later, a lady said, we're doing the wraps. I said, how do you know how to do the wrap? She said, it's on YouTube. I said, who's demonstrating? She said, you. And that's when I realised, oh, it's up on YouTube. So it is up on YouTube. Now, I don't mind it being up on YouTube. It's just that it is a very specialised treatment, and I don't let the staff do this treatment until I've trained them in it. So, but it's there, and I guess you'll learn how to do it if you really want to do it.
Barbara, I was just going to mention that my grandmother that raised me, she took training from a lady from Germany, and the lady demonstrated things to put on the skin, and she said, if you can't eat it, don't put it on your skin.
That's a good one. If you can't eat it, don't put it on your skin. Yep.
Yes, Barbara, when you were talking about Podiarco, would that be in a tincture, in a tea?
Yeah, with the herbs, when it's in a tincture form or a tablet form, it is very concentrated. If you have it in a tea form, you're not getting quite the concentration, and you'd possibly have to drink, you know, at least 4 cups of it a day, or make it very concentrated. But it's just to remember that if you have it in a tea form, it's the least concentration, whereas the tinctures are far more concentrated.
Yeah, I watched your chronic fatigue thing on Amazing Discoveries. I was wondering, you said like an increase of oxygen's really the key. Is there like a magic bullet for that, or that's probably what I'm dealing with? And it's like I take like beetroot. That's what I've heard. Have you got any better options for that?
Well, the hyperbaric chamber, but not everyone has a hyperbaric chamber in their backyard when they're $30,000 to buy one. And I think it's probably, I think they average about $100 for you to have a hyperbaric treatment, which is an hour treatment, and that certainly boosts it. But I guess it's important to have a look at what would be causing it. And I have found, not in every case, but in a large amount of cases, there's been exposure to mould. Like one young man, he was only 22, and he was an air conditioning mechanic. And as the apprentice, he got sent to all the grubby jobs, and so often if an air conditioning unit's not working well, it can harbour mould because of the moisture. And that was his cause. So what's important to do in a case like that is to go on a diet that helps to get the yeast out of the body. And there's a product we have in our retreat in Australia, it's called GO2. And they've used a process to put a lot of oxygen into water. Now, water is usually 8 parts per million oxygen. So what they've done is this fluid is 150,000 parts per million of oxygen. The only problem is it tastes like you're drinking chlorine. I was talking to the guy that made it, and he said, we've tried everything and we can't get away from the taste. But it's just called GO2. So it's possible that you can get it here, I don't know, GO2. So that's another thing. But exercise, and I know when you've got chronic fatigue you don't feel like exercising, and that's why you just start little by little. And of course practice really deep breathing, way down in your abdominal area. Huge, very deep breathing. It gets more oxygen in. Yes?
I have a question on essential oils. I was using some essential oils, and I recently found out some things about them that wasn't very good. So I'm kind of at a loss right now with a brand to be using for essential oils.
Well, your two best are Young Living and doTERRA. So they're your true essential oils. A lot of essential oils that that are in the health food shop are very poor quality. So they're high quality oils. They are essential, so you have to use them in very small amounts. Young Living, and also doTERRA, DOTERRA. There's a question there.
All right, back to the yeast candida thing. Do you know much about the herb chaparral?
Yeah, chaparral. Chaparral is an antifungal herb, that is true. It's also considered to be an excellent cancer herb. And it's also an excellent cancer herb, not only because it's antifungal, but because it's a herb that boosts the healing properties in the body. Dandelion's excellent liver. And cancer can't get a hold on a body when the liver's working well, so the liver also plays a role. We're going to be looking at the liver in detail another night. What part of the dandelion? It's very similar to the comfrey in that the spring and the summer, all the healing properties are majorly in their leaves, whereas in the winter, fall you call it, you're in fall now, aren't you? We call it autumn. They go into the root. So yeah, so it depends what time of the year.
I've been trying to figure out recently if fermented foods are okay, so things like soy sauce and
well, what you'll find with soy sauce, they have a lot of yeast in them, they have a lot of sugar in them, so I don't use soy sauce. Probably the better ones would be Bragg's Amino, Tamari, but personally I don't use them. If I want to put a more rich flavour into something, I'll use miso.
I was just curious, I've been told recently as well that mushrooms are a fungus and not a food. I didn't know if you had any enlightenment on that.
Fungus are a fungus. Sounds a bit silly. So if someone has yeast, a yeast problem, and one way to tell is the tongue. The tongue should be pink from the tip to the back. So white coating at the back of the tongue that can't be scraped off. They're usually little fungus bugs. And if someone has cancer, I advise them not to have mushrooms. But if someone has nice strong hydrochloric acid and don't have those problems, to have a mushroom meal occasionally, I don't have a problem with that. What about apricot kernel seeds? They're excellent. They have something in them called nitrilicide. A nitrilicide, when it is broken down in the gut, it releases cyanide. And when it connects with the pancreatic juices and goes into the cancer cell, that cyanide kills cancer. If it goes into a good cell, there's an enzyme called rhodinase which detoxifies it. And so some people have found that the apricot kernel seeds can be very helpful. They also, being so bitter, they're strong antifungal.
I think I had the impression that fermented foods that produce lactic acid is beneficial or not. I know that the rest, the bacteria, the microorganisms that we need for the flora is good.
Well,
but
remember that sauerkraut's been used for thousands of years, and it's an excellent food. But if it's let go to creating alcohol, you can actually smell it's gone bad. You don't touch it. That's where you would say it's gone to the fermentation process.
What causes stomach acid and how to cure it?
Stomach acid is a wonderful thing that God put in the stomach to break the protein down. And there's actually no such thing as too much acid. Dogs have 10 times the hydrochloric acid that we have, and they don't have reflux and they don't have stomach ulcers. Can you see that? I've never met anyone with too much acid. So if someone says they've got too much acid, I say, fantastic. If you've got strong hydrochloric acid, your food will be broken down in a matter of about 3 hours. Most people think they've got too much acid because they feel a burning in their stomach. That's usually because there's not enough coating on the stomach wall, because God made the stomach with this very thick mucosal lining, which is 99% water. So make sure that person is drinking adequate water. Sometimes acid comes up, but that's not acids. The problem's not the acid, the problem's the little gate. So the little gate is just here, and that little gate is called the cardiac sphincter because of its closeness to the cardiac or heart muscle, and it sits right in the middle of our diaphragm. So that's why it's very important to have strong abdominal muscles. If you've got strong abdominal muscles, then the cardiac sphincter that sits right in the middle of that diaphragm will also be strong, and it'll effectively close to stop the acid coming up. But a habit in America and Australia is to eat breakfast like a pauper, lunch like a pauper, and supper king and queen together. Isn't that right? And then when they lie down to go to sleep at night, the food pushes up, and that little by little, day after week, it weakens that muscle. So we serve our guests breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and we don't give them anything at night except a thin soup. And we give them magnesium. Magnesium is the ultimate muscle relaxer, and it relaxes that cardiac sphincter. So people that come to us with reflux go home without it, just by those simple changes. But we have one lady, she had so much acid coming up that all her esophagus was ulcerated. So we gave her slippery elm, which coats and soothes the lining of that. So when the question is, what do you do for too much acid? It's actually, too much acid's not a problem. You'd ask what the symptoms were.
We'll take this as the last question.
You said to take magnesium. In what form?
What form of magnesium? Magnesium citrate.
Okay.
And so what we would do with someone like that, they would have magnesium just before they go to bed at night, and maybe a little slippery elm before they go to bed at night. And again, making sure that stomach is empty, so there's no food in there. And it's usually they'd have a dose of 500 milligram of magnesium citrate before they go to bed.
And should that be in a liquid form or a pill?
Could be liquid, can be powder. I think in America you Calm, I think that's a powder. I saw at one health retreat I was at.